Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre, Executive Vice President of the European Commission Frans Timmermans, Norwegian Ambassador to the EU Rolf Einar Fife. Dear audience, a warm welcome and a very warm thank you for participating in this dynamic event organised and hosted by the mission of Norway to the EU. My name is Katrina Sickle, and I have the privilege of navigating all of us through the next 1 hour and 45 minutes of discussions brought to you live from the Residence Palace in Brussels. Now, the conversation today is all about Norway and the EU, specifically on enhancing the green industrial partnership between the two, as relates, of course, to the twin green and digital transitions at the heart of the European Green Deal, and a shared goal to create a strengthened industrial base fit for climate neutrality. Now, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you who will stimulate your brains in 2 topic-specific panels. The first will explore how hydrogen can play a key role in the energy transition, and the second hones in on the common challenges and, of course, the opportunities allied to the development of green and resilient value chains for batteries. I'll be chatting with assorted actors from the policymaking, research and industrial spheres. We won't be taking any audience questions during the event, as time really is of the essence, and my speakers do know this, but we do invite you to share your words of wisdom on LinkedIn or even Twitter @NorwayEU. That's it from me, literally no further preamble. Let me hand over the lectern to Norwegian Ambassador to the EU, Rolf Einar Fife. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Prime Minister Støre, Executive Vice President Timmermans, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as Ambassador of Norway to the EU, it gives immense pleasure to welcome you to this EU-Norway Green Partners event. We're particularly honored by the presence of Norwegian Prime Minister Støre and his team, and of the presence of Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans and his team of the European Commission. Together with the Prime Minister, we have, among others, State Secretary for Petroleum and Energy, Mr. Amund Vik, and the State Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Eivind Vard Pettersson, and a number of others. I won't mention them all. I will also salute the presence of prominent representatives of the European Commission, and I won't mention them all. They will appear. They constitute, you already referred to it, a fantastic team of people, and I should like to add, we're in the presence also of prominent actors spearheading change within business, within battery alliances, etc. So we're looking forward to those high-level discussions on how to advance green and resilient value chains. And we will first hear the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre. I'll pass the floor and the screen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Executive Vice President, dear Frans, thank you for being here. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there's a group in the room and there are followers on the screen. Welcome to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be back in Brussels, to be here as Prime Minister, to be here to set an agenda for what is a priority for my government, and to do so in a week where geopolitical realities remind us of the crucial importance of energy, in addition to all the other drama that is linked to what is happening in Eastern Europe these days. But we will concentrate on the challenges that lie ahead of us in relating to climate change and sustainable growth, energy and strategic autonomy and resilience. Challenges, but also really opportunities. So it is this combination where we would like to look to the opportunities that Norway can bring in cooperation with the European Union. The EU has developed the world's most ambitious and concrete plan to cut emissions. And Norway has made it clear we are part of that approach. So when France is spearheading Fit for 55, we too set the main target, and we have made the choice of reaching that target alongside the EU with the same mechanisms and in close collaboration. We are part of the same economic circuit. And that is why, as I've explained several times today, when we react to the blatant breach of international law by Russia in Ukraine, when we react with sanctions, we do so with the European Union, because these are our partners in running the economy. So this is in a way also linked. Now, we have obligations to meet in the coming years. What brings us to Brussels here is that we believe in addition to meeting those obligations, and we will, we have something to bring to the great endeavor it is to cut emissions and create jobs and spearhead Europe in the industrial transition that lies ahead of us. Norway has, of course, the opportunity to develop green industries such as battery technology, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage of CO2, offshore wind and green shipping. All of these are key sectors in our industry. In addition, we will continue to develop our vast energy resources. And this includes natural gas, renewable hydropower, and in the near future, low-emission hydrogen. And we are communicating to our European partners that Norway will remain a reliable provider of natural gas. We've done so for 40 years, and every political responsible I meet in Brussels these days ask a Norwegian Prime Minister, can you deliver more? Can you guarantee that you will stay a reliable partner? On the latter, the answer is yes. Can we deliver more? We deliver at the maximum. But we will continue to do so. And I think that is an important piece of the puzzle of securing Europe's autonomy. We will soon present a strategy outlining the role of the mineral industry in the green transition. We will propose measures in Norway to promote more sustainable mineral industry that can meet European needs. There are rare materials and a number of elements here which fit into the broader industrial mix of moving towards the renewable. Now, Norway is already Europe's largest producer of aluminium, completely integrated in European value chains. And who knows, maybe the first aluminium without carbon will be produced in Norway. And perhaps the first steel produced without carbon will be produced in Sweden, because these are countries spearheading technology, part of the European project. Another key objective of the Green Deal is to make food systems greener and more sustainable. And we are, just to mention that, it's not a topic today, by far the largest supplier of seafood to the European Union, delivering a quarter of the EU's total imports. So France, about a quarter of every fish you eat, you know. You should look north. Sustainably produced close to the European market, our seafood has a low environmental and carbon footprint. But let me mention, because it's important for me as Prime Minister, if we're going to continue on that path, we have to safeguard the oceans, because the oceans are a threatened species. And I chair the ocean panel, high-level panel on ocean economy, trying to bring together and build momentum to fight plastic in the oceans and to really come up with solutions that can continue to deliver sustainable food, work, jobs, and sustainability around the world. Today, dear friends, we will focus on two key industries where there is a particular great potential for closer cooperation between Norway and the EU. First, on batteries. There will be a huge demand for batteries in the decarbonized economy, and the EU has ambitious plans. Norway intends to play a role in the European battery value chain, because that is what it's really about. We can supply several raw materials needed in battery production. In addition, we have ambition, and industry has ambition, to produce gigafactories of batteries in Norway. When I visit these plants, not yet built, they tell me that they have already sold batteries from factories not yet built, because there's a demand rising. We will produce batteries with the lowest possible environmental impact and ensure that these are repurposed, remanufactured, or recycled, feeding valuable materials back into the economy, in line with the circular economy ambition that we have in Europe. And I also believe that we are an example when it comes to the use of batteries. Thanks to economic incentives and establishment of infrastructure, we have swiftly developed a large domestic market for electric vehicles and ferries. Now, electric vehicles in a country of 5.5 million people, the interesting part is that when we created the incentives, the European car industry started to change, even with this little market. And now it is coming along more broadly. Last year, 65% of all new cars in Norway were electric. Last January, that number has risen to 85%. So we are getting close. We are expanding this success story to encompass coastal shipping. More than 80 domestic ferries now have battery packages installed, and there are many more to come. So I believe battery is one important dimension that we can work on together. The other one, of course, is hydrogen. Next phase in the energy transition. Greater use of hydrogen can help to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors and create low-emission industrial growth. Norwegian business and industry is ready to participate in all parts of the European hydrogen value chain. So if a commercial market is developed, and I believe it is about to be developed, Norway can be a significant source of blue hydrogen or ammonia produced from natural gas. And the sentence doesn't stop here because it has to be added with carbon capture and storage. And Frans, you have showed particular interest in that. We have discussed it in your visits in Norway and in your office, and also today in the office of President von der Leyen. We have substantial natural gas resources, and we have 30 years of experience of safe carbon storage offshore. And I have felt that traveling around Europe, you need really to do a lot of explanation, because people on continental Europe believes that carbon capture and storage is a bit like fracking. You have to hit the ground and then put the CO2 down, and it may leak in garage or basements of households. But that's not the case. We have, since the early 90s, tested storage of CO2 on the continental shelf into the reservoirs where the oil and gas came out from, partly as part of pressure service to get out more of the oil and gas, but now also storage. So we have done it in the North Sea, and we have done it in the Barents Sea, and it works, and it doesn't leak. So there are now several Norwegian and European companies eager to explore these opportunities. And I am convinced that CCS, which is an approach, an industrial approach, will become a key technology in the effort to decarbonize Europe, and thereby making gas a source for blue hydrogen and a longer-term transitional energy source in a Europe transitioning towards renewable as we are. The full-scale project Longship is the name of the old Viking ship, is the focal point of our ambitions. Northern Lights, the transport and storage partner, is currently in direct negotiation on storing CO2 equal from the emission from 5 to 6 million cars. That is a prudent start. CCS has an even bigger role to play. Collectively, we need to step up our efforts to develop and deploy CCS in high-emission sectors. And if we facilitate CO2 transport and storage infrastructure in Europe, we take a really significant first step. So, dear friends, we are part of the internal market. We develop our technology in line with European partners. Norway is not a member of the European Union, but we have the level playing field in the internal market, which gives us rights and obligations, but now huge opportunities in capturing the opportunities of 2030 and 2050. So we will do so as partners, and I see no better individual partners than the Executive Vice President and the Commissioner. So I'm very happy to hand the floor to you, Frans, to hear your perspectives. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Jonas. It's such a pleasure to welcome you and your delegation here in Brussels. I was very much looking forward to that. We share so many things between Norway and the EU, but the most important thing we share is our fundamental values. And standing up for our fundamental values today in Europe is more important than ever before since the end of the European divide. We've seen one of the darkest days in modern European history 2 days ago, when, without provocation, Russia decided to disregard fundamental international obligations it has to act in violation of the UN Charter, in violation of the fundamental rules of the rule of law, and thus present a huge challenge to all of us. And we will respond to that challenge with unity, with a strong sense of purpose, and this is all part of that. This is all part of that, because as much as the crisis between Ukraine and Russia is also a consequence of the climate crisis, is also a consequence of permafrost disappearing, of wildfires, of harvests gone wrong, is also a consequence of the Industrial Revolution, a bit comparable to what happened in the 1980s when panic broke out in the Soviet Union because of what was then called SDI or Star Wars. The fear not to be able to be part of the next phase in the world's economy is also all part of this. And our answer should be resolute, it should be united, and it should also offer an opportunity for everyone of goodwill, including Russia, which will remain part of our common continent. It's your next door neighbor, literally. It's our neighbor as well. And we wish only well upon the Russian people. And we wish for them to have a prosperous future in line with the values we all share. And you were mentioning the longboat. You know, the word Rus, I'm a linguist, sorry. The word Rus comes from rowing. And those were Vikings rowing the longboats down to where now is Kiev, all the way down to the Black Sea. That's how that's how Herodotus wrote about Ukraine. So it's a very, very old nation, European nation, the crossroads of many European cultures. I say this because in this period of fundamental transition in our societies, this generation has a duty which is daunting. We only have 10 years, certainly not more, to do something about the most daunting crisis humanity might have ever faced, which is the climate crisis. If we do not change the logic of an economy based on burning as much carbon as we can, then we will not be able to keep the rise of the Earth's temperature below 2 degrees. And we will reach a number of tipping points that will show disasters of a nature we've never seen before. And we see all sorts of natural events happening today, which are worse than anything we could have imagined. At 1.1 degree temperature increase, just imagine what would happen if we would reach those tipping points. In that context, we need everything to help us reduce CO2 emissions and methane emissions. Nothing is excluded. We have the duty to be absolutely eclectic in our choices. Of course, our preferred options are renewable energy. Why? Because it's cheap, because it's available everywhere, and because it will only get cheaper, and it is eternally renewable, solar and wind energy. But we cannot just rely on them, certainly not in the period leading up to us decarbonizing our economy. In that period, we will also need to be able to decarbonize fossil fuel. And in that context, the years and years of investment Norway has done in developing CCS and CCU technologies will pay off now. Now, I have to confess, I was in government in the Netherlands when this idea came up that, okay, we can have more coal-fired power generation as long as we link it to CCS. And then it was clear the technology was not ready for direct CCS from coal-fired power generation. And then also a couple of mistakes were made, and indeed, Jonas, what you said, people were afraid because they thought we would inject CO2 into the soil and that might come back and suffocate everyone. So we lost a lot of political time because of that, and we thought, well, let's disregard this, let's not look at this anymore, let's go just for renewables. Since then, we've understood that CCS applied, for instance, on natural gas and in certain circumstances, also at the source. For instance, we will need to capture a lot of methane and we need to do this very quickly. CCS can play an important role in that, and I'm absolutely convinced that what Norway has developed in the last couple of years is of huge interest to the EU, and we need to continue to work on further developing this technology and applying it as much as possible. I also have a geopolitical reason for this, because if we genuinely believe we need to offer Russia an opportunity for future cooperation once Russia comes back to behaving in line with its international obligations and respects also the liberty of its neighbors, then I believe easing them out of their full dependency on fossil fuel is going to be part of the solution. And then, of course, blue hydrogen might play a role in this, because for the base load in Europe, we will need hydrogen. Quantities of hydrogen that we cannot produce ourselves in Europe as green hydrogen, but that will be necessary for difficult to abate sectors, will be necessary for heavy transport, for the steel industry you've mentioned, aluminium industry, cement industry, other industries. And that could create international partnerships. We'll see them across the Mediterranean. We will see them with also sub-Saharan Africa. This will be a new global energy market. But as you have said, Jonas, earlier today, any transition in energy markets or in energy resourcing has fundamental implications for societies and economies. Fundamental. So after 200 years of full dependency on fossil fuels without any regard for the consequences for our natural environment, external costs were never put into that, we will now have to rethink our economic model because we have to rethink our energy resourcing model. And easing us into this sustainable future, we will need also to decarbonize existing resources of fossil fuel as long as we need them. I think we have to be more careful in exploring, creating the conditions for new exploration of fossil fuel resources. There I would be very cautious. But in terms of easing us into this new world, we will need hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and at the end we will also need massive amounts of green hydrogen. You mentioned batteries. Yes, batteries are part of the solution. I'll come back to that in a moment. But we will never be able, if we are able to generate huge amounts of very cheap offshore wind energy in the North Sea, and we will be able to do that, we will need to get that energy to where it is needed. And grids are not the only solution. By far they're not. Batteries are certainly not the only solution. And green hydrogen will be also a storage facility for energy we could then transport somewhere else. And by the way, using and adapting our natural gas grid that we have only is 25% of the cost of creating a new energy system for renewable energy. So there are many, many reasons to explore that. And I'm sure we will do this jointly with Norway. I also believe in our climate policy jointly with Norway. We can do more in helping countries outside of the European Union make the transition to renewable energy. I was in Vietnam last week. Just one example where I believe a just energy transition approach is an approach we already developed with South Africa, could also be developed with Vietnam. And I would very much like to see Norway being part of that, also because technologies will need to be used and support will have to be given. Now, briefly on batteries. The European Battery Alliance, I think, is a huge success. We are rethinking. First of all, we're coming to terms with the fact that we have to take care of our own battery needs and cannot only depend on the producers and developers in Asia. Secondly, we also have to come to terms with the fact that we will have to have different batteries. Solid-state batteries, batteries with different components, batteries with natural resources that can be recycled, batteries that are lighter and still provide more energy. All these things will have to be done, and they're happening as we speak. I mean, with all the trouble we have in our day and age, with all the looming threat of the climate crisis, it's also an exciting time because we're seeing so many technological breakthroughs, also in terms of batteries. And also there, I believe, the answer, because you will have extraction to create these batteries. If you can combine the place where you extract the natural resources with the place where you actually build the batteries, you decrease your carbon footprint tremendously, and you bring economic opportunity to places that have suffered because of the closing of mines, etc. And I think there's a lot of places in Europe where this could be part of a just transition approach. Final comment. I honestly believe that there are many areas where the EU can work more closely with one of its strongest partners, Norway, not a member of the EU, but member of the Transatlantic Alliance, sharing exactly the same values as are at the core of the European Union, sharing exactly the same analysis of the challenges we face in the future, also willing to leave no one behind in this transition. Because we've seen with these incredibly high energy prices how many of our citizens are suffering. And we need to find an answer, a collective answer to that challenge as well. And I believe this could be also a template of our relationship with other countries that are not or no longer members of the European Union, but still share our values. Thank you very much, Jonas, for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Now, Executive Vice President, I understand that he does have a prior engagement, so I'm going to enable him to leave with the Prime Minister momentarily. They're going to step outside the room where we are at the Residence Palace. But in the interest of time, I'm going to crack on. But I would say thank you so much to both the Prime Minister and the Executive Vice President. I think you would probably agree that if we kind of close the event here, we've kind of done pretty well so far. Already what we've heard from both of them in their opening presentations has been super interesting, and I do thank both of them for really nailing some of those topics that our keynote speakers and panelists have to somehow cover in, well, the cool few minutes that we have. And so let us indeed dive straight into the first of the panel discussions. And that one, as I said, and as you heard, explores how hydrogen can play a key role in the energy transition. Now, we have two keynote speakers to frame the chat, and then we have four eloquent panelists. I'm going to invite the first of those speakers to take over the lectern from me now and give a very warm welcome, please, for the Director General of DG Energy at the European Commission, Dieter Juul Jørgensen. So I'm going to give you a warm welcome myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the kind welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans has already set out the role that hydrogen can play in our energy transition as a carrier of energy on the road to climate neutrality, a road that we share in the European Union with Norway, of course. The supply of, in particular, renewable hydrogen from Norway to the EU could become a third pillar of our already stable and very lively and important energy trade. So what I would like to do is to set out some thoughts on how we can take this cooperation on hydrogen forward between the European Union and Norway. We're meeting at a challenging moment. Others have spoken to that, but it is a moment that has a significant impact on our energy sectors and our economies and on our citizens. Energy prices have risen to levels that we haven't seen in decades as the global demand for gas has surged during the economic recovery, and this is essentially set to continue an increasing demand for gas globally. As we respond to that situation here in the European Union, I would like to underline, first of all, that the European-Norway cooperation on energy is very solid, as both the Prime Minister and the Executive Vice President have set out, and it has passed the test yet again. So thank you to our Norwegian partners for being reliable, including on deliveries of natural gas, on the transparency of markets, and thank you for this complementarity that binds us together and that fosters a positive mutual dependence and closer cooperation as we look forward. Now, recent developments, including geopolitical developments, show once again that the only way forward, and the Executive Vice President has said that eloquently, that the only way forward for us is to decarbonize our economy, for the climate, for our economies, and for our security. Norway, as the Prime Minister has set out, shares our commitment to deliver a net zero economy by 2050. So we are now taking on this challenge together, delivering on this clean energy transition. And it's clear as we look ahead that natural gas, an important energy component in our energy mix, will continue to play a role in this transition towards a clean economy. And our economic forecasts that the demand for gas will even slightly increase towards 2030 and then even out and start diminish progressively over the coming decades. We will try to replace the fossil fuels by electrification, of course, but also by synthetic gases, by biogas, and we will rely more and more on renewable energy in the years to come. So hydrogen is a central piece of our clean energy economy, a necessary factor in this transition. We have our hopes high on renewable hydrogen that promises to be a real game changer for the hard-to-abate sectors, making a net zero energy system possible. But as the Executive Vice President and the Prime Minister have also set out, we're looking to hydrogen, generally low-carbon hydrogen, into our, as part of our energy transition. So we are in the process within the European Union of creating a new hydrogen market, both on supply and demand side. We're not alone in the exercise. The last time I counted, there are about 50 various intergovernmental initiatives, strategies, and plans for the development of hydrogen. And we in the European Union would like to play a leading role in these global developments, drawing on the strengths of our internal market that we share with Norway, of course. And it is logical in this context that we seek, first of all, to cooperate with our closest neighbours and our reliable partners. So once again, the reliability of our partnership, but also the fact that the Executive Vice President and the Prime Minister set out that we share a common regulatory framework with Norway in the EEA. So thank you to Norwegian colleagues for the active input into the development of our regulatory framework for hydrogen, for which we proposed a series of measures last summer and again in December, and that the two co-legislators are now working on together. These proposals were dedicated to developing or regulating the hydrogen infrastructure, pipelines, storage, import terminals, and the injection of renewable and low-carbon gases into the existing conventional gas grid. They set a regulatory regime for hydrogen import pipelines and provide for terminology and certification for low-carbon hydrogen. And they seek at the same time to support the production and the consumption in what are hard-to-abate applications by targeting the two lead markets of industry and transport. And in this way, we will make sure that hydrogen is mostly used for the purposes where that actually makes sense. This is what is foreseen in our energy system integration strategy. So the role of hydrogen, in particular renewable hydrogen, to complement the direct use of renewables and electrification, and of course to complement energy efficiency as the most important investment for all of us. These demand-side targets on hydrogen will push the industry and will push transport operators to use renewable hydrogen and other sorts of clean hydrogen. It will help drive up investments, in particular in renewable hydrogen. It will create economies of scale and significantly help reduce the need of public support schemes over the coming decade. Now, secondly, creating a regulatory regime for renewable hydrogen makes sense if we're able to either produce it here in the European Union and with Norway, or if we're able to bring it to our market. We currently in the European Union have a renewable share of 37%, and we're still looking to phase out coal in our power generation, currently responsible for 15% of electricity generation in the European Union. So before anything, we need to accelerate and increase the share of renewable electricity generation so that that can help replace the fossil-based power generation that we currently have in our system. And we need to electrify our transport system, our buildings, and some of the lower temperature industrial applications. And then at the same time, we need to scale up hydrogen already in this decade, as the Executive Vice President has set out, to decarbonize in the hard-to-abate sectors where it simply is not possible or cost-efficient to actually electrify. Our ambition for renewable hydrogen is about 10 million tons by 2030, and that will require 500 terawatt-hours of electricity. This is a lot. It's more than the total power generation in France currently in a year, so it will require significant investments in order to get there. By comparison, we imported in 2021 17 terawatt hours of renewable electricity from Norway alone. So this is a huge challenge, but it's also a great opportunity. And here, Norway is, of course, uniquely positioned thanks to your abundant production of renewable electricity in particular that exceeds the own Norwegian consumption and can allow you to export hydrogen to the European Union in addition to renewable energy. Now, imports of hydrogen from Norway into the European Union would allow us to strengthen and diversify our supply of hydrogen, and it would help us achieve the ambitious targets we have set ourselves. And Norway, in this way, can work closely with the European Union and contribute to what will be an increased flexibility and balancing of the European energy system. And of course, it opens other opportunities for an integration of our energy systems for a better use of the energies that are there. The possibility in particular to use hydrogen to store excess renewable electricity for longer periods of time and to transport it easily for shorter distances really provides new opportunities to bring renewable electricity from other regions offshore to into other parts of Europe. With the proximity, the geographic proximity, with the availability of gas pipelines, Norway can use hydrogen to further strengthen its role, including as a renewable energy exporter to the European Union, and contribute to the decarbonisation of our energy systems. And then thirdly, there are of course opportunities for cooperation also across the full hydrogen value chain. We need to cooperate on storage and transport. There are many open questions at a technical level, and there are planning issues and there are organizational questions where I think we can benefit from working together both in the European Union and in Norway. We need new industrial processes, and I know Norway has important projects of common European interest on developing green ammonia, and that's a good example of what will be needed to make that shift in our industries. And then, of course, in Europe, companies are working on similar projects, both on the supply and the demand side. And then we need new transport solutions, so it's good to see companies like Equinor and Norled engaging in our research programs in the European Union to develop vessel running on liquid hydrogen in the future. So the common regulatory framework for hydrogen in the European Economic Area will give us an opportunity to shape together the international hydrogen market and help build a leading role there. We can also look at how to use our cooperation to promote a similar collaborative types of frameworks in other parts of the world and work with global partners. The geopolitics of the energy transition affects all of us and will continue to do so. The recent Einar report on the geopolitics of hydrogen shows very clearly how hydrogen can actually help us shape these new relationships within the next decade and change the global map. So Norway and EU cooperation can show the world how this can be done operationally and practically to the benefit of both sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, so much that I hope our panelists are kind of scribbling down. There is so much to cover, and incredibly comprehensive, and I think what we will discuss, certainly in that first panel, and I think that's one of the main messages to come out of it, which we just heard there from the Director General, these opportunities for cooperation across the whole value chain, and really hydrogen in its role in particularly this current geopolitical context and setting a new path. So thank you so much. We have a second, before I can invite our panellists, we do have a second keynote speaker, and that is the State Secretary, Norwegian Ministry of Petroleum and Energy, and his name is Amund Vik. So a warm welcome to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by saying that I'm very glad to be in Brussels. This is my first trip here as State Secretary of Petroleum and Energy. And it's no doubt that the discussions in Brussels are of key importance also for Norway. In that respect, it was really interesting to hear Director General Ditte Juel Jørgensen's reflections on the Commission's perspectives for hydrogen. Hydrogen provides a solution to decarbonize our hard-to-abate sectors and create industrial growth and jobs on the back of technology and competence developed through our energy industries. However, success depends on overcoming many barriers, including the need for new technology for new application areas, reducing costs compared to fossil-based alternatives, and improve energy efficiency throughout the value chain. We also need regulations and standards that ensure safe handling of hydrogen, and we need infrastructure. All of this must be done fast if we are to curb climate change. In other words, we need to work harder, and we need to work together. A closer EU-Norway cooperation will provide an important component in this effort. As a country with a long history with hydrogen, we have seen the different stages of the evolution to where we are today. Norway has developed and used our rich natural resources, be that renewable energy sources or petroleum, in a manner that benefits all of our society, and we will continue to do that. Norway has vast energy resources. The Norwegian electricity production is based on hydropower, which can be stored in our reservoirs. Our power mix is therefore 100% renewable, with a surplus excess for export in most years. We have the potential to produce even more power from renewable energy, such as offshore wind. Furthermore, Norway is the largest exporter of gas to the European Union, supplying around a quarter of demand, and we will continue exporting large volumes of natural gas for a long time. And in the long term, our natural gas could become the basis for low-emission hydrogen production in combination with CCS. When it comes to sources of hydrogen, we believe it's essential that governments take a technology-neutral approach. What matters is that we can produce enough volumes of clean, low-emission hydrogen at the lowest possible cost. This is best secured by competitive energy markets with efficient pricing of greenhouse gas emissions. Gathered here today are owners of exciting industry projects that will help drive momentum forward. Clearly, we have the competence and solutions befit the energy transition, and an enhanced EU-Norway partnership will contribute to accelerate the momentum for hydrogen required in order to reach our common climate goals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I like that. I liked how that was described. Owners of exciting energy projects. Wow, that's put the pressure on our 4 panelists now. So I'm going to ask them to please come to the stage, and then I will join you. This is our nice living room. So who do we have? We have Rolf who is Project Manager, Hydrogen Project, also responsible for CSR and communication at Tizir, Titanium and Iron. We have Gahr Brantenberg, who is Head of Northern Europe at Heidelberg Cement. We have Christian Röning-Tönensen, CEO at Statkraft, and we have Greta Tveit, who is Vice President at Equinor. So thank you. So lovely to have you with me. There we go. So, a lot of, I love that you just did a raised eyebrow there, I like that, yeah, just doing a little bit there. You can do it to me, because I feel like we've been totally outnumbered. No, we have had the Director General DG Energy. It's good to have the women here, so thank you. So, owners of exciting energy projects. We've heard a lot. I mean, here we heard, I think from the Commission there, hydrogen is a real central piece of the clean energy transition to complement the direct use of renewables. We heard from Timmermans, easing us into this new world. We need hydrogen, certainly to decarbonise those hard-to-abate sectors. So we're going to get stuck in by first hearing about some of those exciting projects. I think that's the best way to proceed. So I'm going to give each of you a little bit of space to share some concise insights. You know that. I've terrorised them all into being concise, I have to say, into your respective companies' hydrogen strategies and projects. And of course, there are lots of overlaps and synergies too. So let me start with the gentleman on my right, if I may. Tell us, I mean, Tizir is owned by French Eramet Group, and as I understand it, is Europe's only producer of titanium oxide slag. And I'm going to ask you to tell us just a little bit about Eramet's top-line activities and one specific project that you're running. I believe, is it in southwest Norway, the Hydrogen Replaces Coal project? So let's hear a little bit about that, please. Thank you so much.
Many thanks. And many thanks for inviting Eramet and Tizir to this seminar. It's an honor to be here. We have been working on a very exciting project replacing coal by hydrogen for many years. This is something I'll come a little bit back to. Tizir is, as you said, owned by the French group Eramet. Eramet has operations on 5 continents in 20 countries and has a very close presence in Norway with 4 plants with more than 750 employees. Tizir is located in Tyssedal, Norway. We are producing approximately 210,000 tons of titanium dioxide slag for the titanium industry, and also 85,000 tons of high purity iron, mostly for European foundries. We have strong links to Europe, both through our ownership and through our markets. Most of our products are exported to European countries. Our raw materials today are ilmenite, coal, and hydroelectric power. Now we are planning to replace the coal by hydrogen in our production process through introduction of pioneering technology. Tysir's hydrogen project is one of 2 Norwegian projects which has been approved as IPCEI hydrogen projects from Norway. And this is really an honor to be in that position. Some of the key results expected from the projects are that we will reduce our carbon dioxide emissions by approximately 82%. We will be able to increase, or we will have a more than a 35% reduction of energy consumption. It will give us the possibility to increase production on our existing furnace substantially. And last but not least, it gives us possibilities to synergies both locally and internationally. Through the IPCEI program, we are now starting to cooperate with European steel producers. We have similar processes, and we have some of the similar challenges with regard to using fossil raw materials today, and hydrogen can be the key to change that for the steel industry and for us. Locally, we are part of a local hydrogen hub, where we are looking at production of hydrogen, storage, and consumption, and also use the hub also as a place for mobility reasons. So this is very exciting, where we are working with Statkraft, Technip FMC, Odda Technology, and Fluorseed locally. And we really look forward to starting the cooperation with European steel companies for this type of process.
Thank you so very much. And you use the word there, pioneering. So, but you're still in this, I mean, just a quick one, and pioneers, so you're still seeing what's happening, is that correct? It is a learning. This is definitely a learning, and we are planning now piloting projects in the next years to come, where we will do a lot of research and development to understand and verify that what we have seen now carried out so far is actually working in pilot scale and then in demonstration scale a little bit later on, and then giving us a good foundation to do the full scale building of such a plant. Thank you very much. I will come back to you. Let me turn to you, please, if I may, Giv Brantenberg from Heidelberg. So do you want to start by just sharing some top lines? I mean, I do want to talk to you about CCS very critically because it's come up so many times, and certainly because it's been discarded. So I can either dive in on that question, or I can just give you a little bit of a chance to say a couple of words on activities. Which do you prefer?
I thought I'll give you the statement. Yeah, and,
okay, absolutely. Go ahead, and then I'm going to grill you on a couple more issues that we can pick up from our keynote speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Prime Minister Støre, Director General Jørgensen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to participate in this important discussion and being able to present HeidelbergCement's efforts to decarbonize the cement and concrete industry. An absolute requirement in our joint efforts in society to decarbonize the built environment and promote green, sustainable construction. We are at the beginning of a new era of transforming industry, transportation and energy sectors, a transformation that will need to take place jointly and be based on new partnerships and collaboration. Carbon capture and storage is regarded as a cornerstone in decarbonizing our built societies, and for the cement industry, the building of the world's first carbon capture facility at industrial scale is, as we speak, well on the way at HeidelbergCement's plant in Brevik, Norway. In 2024, the first of its kind facility will be up and running, capturing 400,000 tons of CO2 yearly. And this is only the beginning. We signed in 2019 an MOU with Equinor to investigate the possibilities of linking other plants of HeidelbergCement to Northern Lights transportation and storage infrastructure for CO2 in the North Sea. As a result of this cooperation, and only 6 months into the building of our project in Norway, we announced last June our ambition to roll out this technology to our cement plant in Slite on Gotland, Sweden. Our target is to have commissioned in 2030 a capture facility for up to 1.8 million tons of CO2, enabling the world's first carbon-neutral cement plants and offering the possibility to create negative emissions. These projects are globally in the absolute forefront of large-scale industrial transformation. A key success factor has been and will continue to be joint efforts between governments, authorities, and industry. The Norwegian government's priorities to support the development of an industrial-scale full CCS value chain has been key not only to the Brevik project, but also to initiate the spark for the scaling up of CCS in Europe. Key topics at EU level for an accelerated deployment of CCS in our industry are: 1, a well-functioning and proven in practice carbon border adjustment mechanism as soon as possible. This means that we need to see a CBAM working well in our European markets before a stepwise reduction of free allocation takes place. 2, defining a European infrastructure strategy for transport and storage solutions. 3, further strengthening the Innovation Fund. And 4, strengthening the energy system in Europe to ensure a cost-efficient, decarbonized and stable electricity supply. Our mission is defined by our responsibility throughout our value chain, from the efficient use of resources to the built environment, from our suppliers to our customers. Transportation of heavy building materials to the construction site is a key part of our business, but also constitutes one of the key challenges to fully decarbonize our value chain. Hydrogen will play a central role when cutting our transport-related emissions. As an example, Heidelberg Cement has entered into an agreement with the Norwegian grain cooperative Felleskjøpet and shipowners Ulvan to build the world's first zero-emissions bulk carrier fueled by hydrogen to be supplied by Statkraft. The ship will go from the west coast to the east coast of Norway, carrying our products in one direction and grain in the other. As a conclusion, we jointly have inspiring years ahead with a key task to manage a rapid decarbonization. And our stance is clear: to continue to lead the way in our sector and take our responsibility towards the Paris 1.5-degree target. Thank you.
Thank you. Now can I pinpoint CCS? Yes. So let me just ask you, because it came up, and again I'm quoting, I'm a bit of a scribbler when listening to other speakers. We heard Executive Vice President talk about CCS. It lost a bit of political time. He also said that the industrial approach can be seen, when he travels around, a little bit like fracking, but it is an absolutely key technology and we need to deploy it in high emission sectors. So it has for a while been regarded or discarded by many as too expensive. I'm coming now to the cost side of things. What would you say in answer to that?
Well, I think you have to look at the alternatives. And if you look at CCS as a technology, it's no different than other technologies in their beginning. As we deploy them, as we scale up, you're bound to see cost efficiency moving in. You're bound to see the capture cost coming down. That's a given for us in all technological developments. Looking at the incentive is obviously that at one end you are penalized by having to pay CO2 taxes or and carry those costs for emitting. At the other end, you have the opportunity to do something and capture those. And if you look at the carbon price today at €100 thereabout, obviously the incentives are kicking in. I mean, this is one thing that we've said all along, is that you need to have a high enough CO2 price to make these projects happen. And if you look at it from a consumer point of view, obviously, I mean, these are large projects that we roll out in our industry. But if you look at it from a house owner or, let's say, a family home perspective, we are talking of a few percentage increases in total cost of a structure like that to be carbon-free in the future. So what we say is it's affordable to go green.
Thank you very much. And I can see you all nodding. Now, the way when I spoke with these good people before the event, we sort of decided that once they've all laid out their stall, anyone, because I can see you nodding, who wants to comment on, obviously, a fellow, because you all have these overlapping, you just cited a project that you have together, please hold that thought. Let me first now hear from the CEO of Europe's largest renewable energy producer and a global company in energy market operations. So, Christian Rønning-Tønnesen, tell us what Statkraft is doing on green hydrogen and the contribution of green hydrogen to the energy transition, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so Statkraft is Europe's largest producer of renewable energy, and we also have substantial operations in South America and India, and market operations in the US. And we are engaged in hydropower, wind power, solar power, but also in district heating and hydrogen and derivatives thereof, like green ammonia and also into biofuels. So we are in all the large renewable technologies in the world. And we are presently constructing around 20 large power plants and refurbishments. In just 3 years from now, our target is to construct between 40 and 50 power plants per year. That is almost one per week. And that will supply new renewable electricity to around 2 million people, new people per year. So some of this electricity will be used to produce hydrogen. Renewable electricity and renewable energy in general is the main tool at hand we have to solve the climate crisis. But it's also something needed to increase the self-production of every country and every region. It is simply increasing the security of supply. So in these days, with the crisis going on in Ukraine, it's important for both those two reasons. Well, hydrogen is needed in addition to renewable electricity, which will be the most of the new electricity, but maybe 5%, maybe 10% of the total world supply of energy in the future will be via hydrogen. Hydrogen cannot come from nothing. It comes from natural gas, or it comes from electricity to split water in by hydrolysis. And what we are engaged in, since we are a renewable electricity company dominantly, we are in green hydrogen. In Norway, we have 7 projects, 2 which have been mentioned here, and 5 others, including green ammonia. And we have 1 in Sweden, 1 in Germany, and we're looking at some in the UK. So what we see as a development is that green hydrogen, so produced from electricity, that will be produced at the point of consumption. There will be in big industrial scales, but also in a lot of small production points all over Europe. While the blue hydrogen from natural gas will be at huge production plants from natural gas and will be needed to have enough hydrogen in total. But it will be different. And it will supplement each other. So what is needed in order to create this development? I mean, we are talking about a new segment that is almost non-existing today. There is not any country in the world that has a big market for green hydrogen or blue hydrogen for that matter. So we need to create the frame conditions to put it into action. And what is needed is basically 2 things. We need more regulations, like requirements for zero emission shipping. If those requirements are coming and they need to be announced years in advance for the industry to adapt, if they are coming, hydrogen and ammonia, either that is blue or green, will be the most cost competitive among many technologies. But it will be more costly than simply burning fuel and let the CO2 go up into the air. So we need the regulations there. That is the most important. But it's also important in order to get the whole market going that there are some certainty of income for those companies investing first. So we need like contracts for difference on CO2 abatement emissions. How many tons of CO2 can we get rid of by using hydrogen instead, because there is no spot market for hydrogen, so we cannot have a CFD on hydrogen. We need to have it on CO2, which there is a market for. So for those 2 methodologies or policy needs in combination is what is needed, and Europe is leading the world here. So if we are fast, if we're doing it for both reasons of the climate and security of supply, we can be the leaders in the world in this new segment of the economy.
Thank you so much. I will leave it there. I will come back. I have millions of questions, but I need to give you all some breathing space because you've raised some important issues there, not least note you said no country has even a market for these 2 at the moment, and you were very, very specific about what is needed in order to really boost. And I was going to say to you, yes, as the average consumer, when you talked about it, sort of hydrogen as a sector and where it sits, it does seem to certainly in terms of visibility, almost a poor relation to batteries. I mean, there is less visibility. And when you talked about the very tiny rise in price for the consumer, I wonder how many households really, how many consumers grasp that. But let me come to you, if I may, please, Greta. So Equinor is taking a really leading role in the energy transition, not least through optimizing its oil and gas portfolio, as I understand, accelerating growth in renewables and pioneering, we have that word again, developments in carbon capture and in hydrogen. So you've got all sorts of activities and plans related to hydrogen in Norway and Europe. So please tell us a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister and ministers. Equinor's ambition is to be net zero when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And then we say this is for scope 1, 2 and 3, meaning it includes the use of our produced oil and gas. To deliver on this, we need to create a new market on CCS and hydrogen, as mentioned before. Our ambition is that by 2030, we will spend more than 50% of the capex within renewables and low carbon solutions, CCS and hydrogen. Also, we understand that the Fit for 55 package, EU has very ambitious targets, and they are similar to what we have in Equinor. And we do believe, as was said here earlier, that working together, we can help each other achieve those ambitions. And in Equinor, we do both blue and green hydrogen. But today, the blue hydrogen has a cost advantage above the green. It is also scalable and it is reliable. So when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, you can have power from the blue or the green hydrogen as a backup. So you can have a total clean power system if you combine the two. But then to the scale. To put the scale into context, if you take all the installed solar and wind capacity in the world today and turn it into green hydrogen, you will cover about 50% of the grey hydrogen that is produced in the world today. Today that is about 90 gigawatt. What Europe alone will need in 2050, if we aim for the 1.5 degrees centigrade, will need 500 gigawatt as opposed to the 90. So to reach a scale where energy-intensive industries can replace coal and natural gas with hydrogen, blue hydrogen is the only large-scale near-term solution. Of course, in addition to the green, but scale is probably on the blue in the beginning. Then getting hydrogen at scale fast, incentivize building the infrastructure and the market. So then when the world has reached an installed renewable capacity that allows for green hydrogen at scale, it can feed directly into the existing infrastructure and the market. Building the hydrogen and CCS economy requires collaboration across the industry and between governments and industry. And the Norwegian government, through the Longship project that has been mentioned here earlier today, supported the CO2 transportation and storage infrastructure, Northern Lights. At the same time, also the capture project in Heidelberg Cement. And this was, in my mind, the first step in initiating a CCS industry and market in Europe. Then last fall, 4 out of the 7 projects offered EU innovation funding are CO2 capture projects. And that is, to me, the second step. And we need very many more of those steps. Equinor has done, as earlier mentioned here today, large-scale CCS for 25 years on the Norwegian continental shelf. We have done it without any safety incidents and without any leakages. It is safe, we know how to do it, and we have done it for a very long time. So through our blue hydrogen projects in Belgium and in the Netherlands, also elsewhere, but these are the EU projects. We are in dialogue also with the European industry, like, for example, ThyssenKrupp Steel and ArcelorMittal, and how we can help them decarbonize their processes. So, to conclude, Equinor can deliver the full value chain on low-carbon solutions. We produce the natural gas with some of the lowest greenhouse gas footprint in the world, and we can produce hydrogen, and we have a solution for CO2 transportation and storage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to just reiterate for the audience, for all of you listening in, this really is deliberately a scratch the surface teaser. We are bringing you the top line messaging. I have another sort of just 6 or 7 minutes with you because I told you we would incrementally, but I will, so I'm telling the lovely audience at home, we might finish, I think, just after. I hope that will be fine with the Prime Minister. We might finish 5-6 minutes afterwards because I'd like to give a little bit of breathing space to these good people. So, for a very nice intervention there, short one, you wanted to say something, did you not, Christian?
This is a massive challenge, it's quite right. We are talking about changing the world's energy system from dominantly fossil to dominantly renewable. But it is possible. We have the technology. It is on the scale as going from horse carriages to cars. But how many cars did we have when we started? Or going from paper-based communication to electronic, how many computers did we have when we started? This is the scale we are talking about, but we have the technology. What is important for the EU is not to ask that this challenge should only be supplied by new technology. Like the additionality principle, all the hydrogen should be produced only from new renewable power plants, not from the existing. That will make the challenge double. It would have been the same as saying that Europe wanted to go from leaded gasoline to unleaded, but one would only be allowed to produce unleaded gasoline in brand new refineries. I mean, we have to use the existing equipment to produce the hydrogen. And of course, in parallel, we will add a lot of new power plants, like we are building 50 per year soon. But to say that these are the only ones allowed to supply the new technology, that I think will slow down the development.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to, yes, you could, beautifully short intervention, absolutely, go for it. Yes.
I completely agree with you, of course. But I think to mitigate the climate challenge, we need to focus upon electrifying everything that can be electrified. And then we should use the electrons directly into that space, because then you don't lose the energy while turning it into hydrogen and then back to the energy. But we need the combined effort of blue and green, and we need probably all we can think about of new technology into this.
Well, I think what you say echoes very much what we heard from Timmermans, from Executive Vice President at the beginning. I mean, I think that's what he was saying, this kind of much more, how would you say it, holistic approach. There is no one silver bullet, but also I think the kind of the time frames within which these different approaches actually come into play, and when they start to phase out and when they transmute into something else. And I think that's, you're capturing a little bit what he said there. Now, you've been beautifully quiet as a sphinx, so I feel that I would like to come back to you just very briefly. I know you might want to add something on the green and blue hydrogen. I don't know if that, and then I have another question for you, particularly because you brought something up about this facility and the rollout in Sweden, and I just want to ask you about decarbonised cement. So I'll come to you in just a moment. Yes.
No, I share what has been said about the green and blue hydrogen, and I would say for us it really doesn't matter really much if it's blue or green. We need both. Where we are located in an area where there is a substantial production of hydroelectric power, I think it would be obvious that we would look at green, but obviously blue is definitely the same thing. So if there are good solutions for that, that is something that we will look at. And I think for the industry in Europe, developing the consumption of hydrogen, because it's important industrially, because one thing is to produce hydrogen, but having really substantial consumers who are really replacing fossil resources, that's, I would say, it's important to develop, and it takes time. Yeah. It's definitely not done overnight to change traditional processes with this type of new processes.
Thank you very much. Let me come, first of all, is there anything you just want to pop in there from what you've heard from your fellow panellists? And then that's, I think, a very important question to ask. Do you see, what kind of interest do you see from your customers for decarbonised cement?
We've had it from the moment it was known that we were receiving funding from the Norwegian government. We have calls from our existing clients, from new clients, from clients abroad who would like to have a share of this cement when it comes out in 2024. So there's a huge interest for it. We will, of course, remain, a domestic supplier first and foremost, but we know that there's a huge interest for particular, let's say, lighthouse building projects abroad that would like to test the cement. It is the same cement, it has the same applications, it's just green.
So let me ask you each just two, and they are for beautifully, almost like brain box bingo, I call it, the last two questions. The last one you know, but let me just, something else just popped into my head. Yes, we have talked so importantly, the word cooperation, the word unity, particularly when we're talking about Norway and the EU, but in general across the ecosystem. So when we look at industry, you mentioned it, I think you all touched upon it in terms of this relationship with government, with industry, even with the consumer and at a household level. Do you sort of think there should be, somebody needs to react fast, or do you think, no, this is kind of whoever has the brilliant idea and wants to bring somebody else along for the ride? Okay, there are things like incentives and subsidies, and I understand that, but how do you see that? Literally a couple of sentences. What is that value chain? What is that cooperation, whether it's industrial and whether it's in the wider ecosystem?
And as you say, value chain is so important because we're in this new industry. And us as Equinor, we look at how can we invest in CCS, transportation and storage. It costs a lot of money and it takes quite some time to develop it. And we need to make sure there are customers before we put enormous amount of money into it. Okay. So having a value chain along when we move this forward is important. The same with the hydrogen. We also see now a push from the steel industry. So we're not pushing it on them, they're actually contacting us, and that's phenomenal. And it is because I believe their customer, and in particular the car manufacturers, like to produce cars from the green steel. So it seems like we now are moving together, which is a big thing. But also when the government now putting up the terms and the processes around this, make sure to look at the entire value chain so that you make it all work at the same time.
Okay. Coming to you. Keep it beautifully concise. Go ahead.
One important thing is to develop what's happening in the universities and research institutions. This is very much about competence. We need to develop competence in this, and that's key to develop this further. We have a steady, ongoing relationship and cooperation with the research institutions in Norway, and that has been extremely important for bringing our project forward to where we are today.
Thank you. Very important point. I'm glad I give you a gold star for that one, I have to say. No, absolutely key important point, because I didn't even mention that setting, and it's critical within this whole ecosystem. Yes, Christian.
What I can add is that the challenge is huge. The need is certainly here, but we have a few advantages that was not there when the world went from horses to cars, because we are communicating at the speed of light, and we are learning from each other at the same speed. We copy each other. Europe is a big cooperation setup, Norway included in the way we are sitting here today. So we can do in months and a few years what took decades before. So what is needed is that the politicians and the industry and the energy companies are jointly working together in this. We need frameworks on regulations and income side for these new technologies. If that comes on speed, as you say, there we need speed. Then I'm sure with the communication we're all sitting here talking about will happen across companies, across between various, not only the big companies, there will be thousands of small companies in Europe that will follow this development, the green shift. Absolutely. And Europe will again be in the lead in the world. technology-wise.
Thank you. And those thousands, I said this so many times over the course of moderating around EU projects, SMEs are the backbone of the EU economy. Very good that you brought that up, because they're not always the first players at the table, and they absolutely need to be a part of this. To you, please. Thank you, Gahr.
From our perspective, I mean, it's interesting that we're sitting here and we're four of us, and I mean, we have a relationship with Equinor, we have a relationship with Statkraft, and we also use the slag from Eramet in our, as raw materials in our plant in Brevik, and also on our plant in Slite and Gotland. So I think, you know, we've come, you know, from being regarded as a polluting industry, where, you know, we've basically tried to avoid anything publicly. You know, we're trying to be a bit below the radar. And all of a sudden, we have the opportunity to, through new technology, to take a monumental step. I mean, we've, for 30 years, been working on, you know, energy efficiency, alternative raw materials, binders, alternative fuels. And then, all of a sudden, you know, we've come to where the potential of these, let's say, more traditional steps have been reached. And then we're left, you know, with CCS, and all of a sudden, you know, we see that it's something that can be rolled out. We're doing it right now, and it's, for us, extremely encouraging. And through that, all of a sudden, we see that we find new partners in everything that we do. And that, I think, you know, this is a small country. You can imagine what other larger countries could also do with bigger industries, more industries than we have in Norway. So I think that's extremely encouraging to see.
Thank you. You have one sentence, and I mean it, or I'll cut you off, as you know. Look, she says, terribly bossy way. If we had had more time to sit around a table with a lovely glass of wine / aquavit, I don't know. What, and I mean it, what would you have put on the table as an issue to talk about? Or what would you want to underline?
I would underline cooperation. I think that's key, where we're heading in the years to come.
Cooperation. For you?
I would say that it's important to make sure that first movers do not necessarily need an advantage. First mover want to make sure that you don't add a disadvantage of going in front.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Thank you. Yes, to you, Christian.
I would dig more deeply into how can we speed it up with regulations and make it in such a way that the whole world is following.
Thank you. For you.
Almost similar. Cooperation and speed is urgent. The CO2 is accumulating in the atmosphere, and we don't have a lot of time.
Thank you very much. I think you will agree they've been fabulous. I hope everybody at home agrees they've been fabulous. I took a bit more time, but I think it was well worth it. So thank you to all of you, really, for coming this way and for being so beautifully concise. Yes. You are well schooled. Thank you for taking your glasses of water with you if you use them. You need to gently file to the back of the room, and our speakers from the next panel need to gently jog after them, because you need to take over the microphone. And I'm going to take us all into the second panel. So I'm going to change. Here we go. Now, you know this now, we've mentioned it a few times, and this, obviously, this entire conversation cannot take place without looking at batteries. So the next panel really is all about advancing green and, very important word, resilient industrial value chains. So that encompasses batteries, we're looking at raw materials, we're looking at the technology. As for the previous panel, we do have two keynote speakers to frame the discussions, and the first of those is the Programme Director of the European Battery Alliance, called Støre. So, and I think Timmermans described the EBA as a huge success, if I caught that quote correctly. So please, a very warm round of applause for this gentleman. Thank you very much.
Dear Prime Minister, dear ladies and gentlemen, I lead the European Battery Alliance, the industrial part of it. Vice President Timmermans was referring to the whole thing. I deal with the industrial part. We're about 700 members, everything from startups to multinationals, finance institutes, research and development, governmental institutions, and so on and so forth. And our common goal is to promote and create a sustainable and resilient European battery industry. That is our goal. And I'm talking about the whole value chain, like has been pointed out several times. We started in 2017. Back then, there was practically nothing when it comes to battery industry in Europe. Literally, well, there was fragments, but very, very little. That has changed. And if I could have the first slide, please. This is a busy slide, and it shows a selection of all the different cell manufacturing factories that are out there now. I know of 50 different projects going on, and this is not so bad, actually. Most of them are, in fact, not in production. China is still ahead of us, but it's increasing at a fantastic pace. And this is in 4 or 5 years that this has come. So this must be some kind of world record when it comes to building industry here in Europe. 3 of these are Norwegian. I'd like here on this page to make a note that this is the new, in my world, this is the new European battery regulation working for us. It's imposing sustainable standards on the batteries to be sold here in Europe, and it's driving us towards a sustainable and resilient industry. Europe is today the biggest single market when it comes to EVs. We have beaten China when it comes to EVs. That happened last year. Europe is today attracting foreign companies to install themselves in Europe to build, to create value here. So, are we finished then? Is this done? Is this good enough? Not quite. I go to the next slide. This is an equally busy slide, but if you had the chance to look at all the volumes that are summarized here, you will find that this slide describing different parts of the value chain, upstream and downstream, is here the progress is not so evident yet. It has to be improved. Yes. So we still import most of the raw materials that we use for our battery factories here in Europe. And I'm sorry to say that the few used batteries that we are finished with, they are exported out of Europe, so we lose that raw material, which could be recycled back in. This is, let me put it in a positive way, there is ample room for much more European value creation in upstream and downstream. Now, those were very busy slides. Yes, I'll finish off now. This is a summary. You see 2 dotted lines. Those are the expected European demand in 25 and 30. The blue columns, they are supposed to reach those lines. You see the dark blue is now, the middle blue is 25, and the light blue is in 30. So you see, none of them reach the demand, actually. We're not so bad in cell production capacity and in applications. Here we're definitely in the game, and there will be more, so this is good. But the upstream that I just talked about, that is lacking, and also on the recycling part. Yes, concluding. Demand is gigantic and growing. All reports that I have ever seen have been too conservative, and half a year after they are produced, they are outdated and too conservative. The demand is, in fact, so big that there is market for everyone. The flavor of the day, or maybe the decade, should, in fact, be cooperation instead of competition. We need to compete to follow the rules, but cooperation is what we need to have a chance to meet these demands. Last point. We need to remember, why are we doing this? Well, of course, it needs to be done in a sustainable and in a resilient way. And here, bringing this back to Norway, here is where I think Norway can make a big contribution, especially with the clean energy and the relatively inexpensive energy, and also this extensive and long-lasting experience on power-intensive chemical processes, which is battery industry is exactly that. So Norway, these are only two of the benefits here in Norway. And I think I stop there. Okay? Yes.
Thank you. And not because it is not super interesting. That is the key, and that's very important. And as I said to you, it's my least favourite part of the job to have to tell people to round off. But thank you, and also thank you for the illustrations, because for a PowerPoint, it was not death by PowerPoint. It was very useful slides. So thank you so very much. We have a second keynote speaker now. So an equally warm welcome to State Secretary at the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is Eivind Vad Petersen. So a warm welcome to this gentleman, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The essence is, of course, that to reach our climate goals, to decarbonize transport and energy, we need batteries. Indeed, everything that can run on batteries will soon have to run on batteries. And however, we must make sure that battery production is as environmentally friendly and circular as possible. We believe the European Commission's proposed battery legislation outlines a very good framework to achieve these aims. And we're lucky to have Patrick Child from DG Environment in the Commission here today as well. Norway's Climate and Environment Minister, Espen Barth Eide, is participating at the ministerial meeting of the European Battery Alliance, also taking place this afternoon. And both here and in the Battery Alliance meeting, we will discuss how to strengthen the resilience of the European battery industry. One of the measures is to cooperate and create European value chains. Another is to secure supplies of sustainable raw materials. The Norwegian government believes that the EU and Norway should work closely together in these endeavours. We are dependent on Europe for solid regulation and large markets, two key ingredients for developing a competitive battery industry. But we also see Norway as one piece of the European battery puzzle. Actually, Norway was the largest European market for fully electric vehicles in the last decade. And the development is astonishing. As was mentioned by the Prime Minister earlier this afternoon, in the month of January, last month, almost 85% of all new cars sold in Norway were battery electric. And January in Norway is cold, and January this year also had record high electricity prices. But nonetheless, almost 85% fully electric cars. In addition, we also have over 80 battery-propelled ferries along our long coast. This makes Norway a very interesting testbed for how batteries on wheels can be integrated in modern societies. It also means that Norway can be a testbed for what a battery's fate is at the end of its life. Will it be exported, as was mentioned? Will it be reused? Will it be scrapped? Will a market for secondary raw materials develop? We will need the latter in order to build a truly circular European battery market. We share, from the Norwegian side, the EU's high ambitions for creating a vertically integrated battery industry. The Norwegian government is now working on a mineral strategy and a battery strategy. Besides the upstream aspects, we'll emphasize, of course, recycling. I look forward to hearing from the panel today. You represent parts of the value chain that must all pull together for us to create a new European battery adventure. Thank you very much, and back to you and the panel, Katrina.
Thank you, and thank you for that very positive word, adventure. That's a good one. So let me invite, without further ado, are they all ready, the panellists? Are you there? Have you been mic'd up? Oh my goodness, it's like hot off the press, hot from being mic'd up. From the European Commission, we should have the Deputy Director General at DG Environment, Patrick Child. If you sit next to me, that would be delightful, so lovely to see you. We've also got Morten Hallerake, who is Head of Batteries at Hydro. Please take a seat. We have Stian Madshus, who is Vice President and General Manager Europe at Vianode, which is, of course, an Elchem company. And we have Uwe Seidel, who is Project Manager at IPCEI Battery. So formally, not formally as in the past, as in formally, officially, I love this, led by the German Ministry of Industries, but operationally led by VDI-VDE, German Research Institute. So, adventure, that's the word, adventure. That's what we're going to carry through here. Very interesting, we heard, just to say from Støre there, we heard some interesting points which you said, you've got, demand is gigantic and growing. There is absolutely a market for everyone. There should be cooperation, not competition. And then, we're still importing most of the raw materials, and yet we're exporting used batteries out of Europe. So let's just hear from each of you in turn, of course, because the European battery regulation is very much your baby. Is that the way to say it? Pat, look at your face. I think I need to give the first question to you in terms of, if we look at this coming battery regulation, how do you think it is going to affect this European battery market?
Yeah, well, thanks, Prime Minister. I mean, and Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'm more comfortable with the adventure than the baby. But,
are you? Okay. But, they're both the same, surely, Patrick.
Well, in this manual that you've put together for this discussion, I think we're probably all happy with the adventure. No, I mean, I think that the context that we're working in, and as I said, I mean, this is clearly a highly strategic industry. And I'm picking up a word you used before, one which is, sort of defined by its pioneering character. I mean, a lot of things that we're doing today in batteries and that we've done in the past years in batteries are things that we want to broaden to other strategic value chains in the future. And I think that's very important. So I would like, to start by congratulating Gahr and the colleagues who've been working so hard since Vice President Šefčovič launched the European Battery Alliance back in 2017. And the huge progress that's been made is sort of defining a new model for stakeholder engagement in the way that we work together with industry and other stakeholders in defining what we want to achieve. And this is really at the heart of what we're now bringing to other strategic value chains in the new European industrial strategy as part of our green and digital post-COVID recovery strategy. Turning to the regulation which was proposed in 2020, and there we have seen indeed quite an exciting acceleration of progress in the discussions on our proposal, both in the European Parliament in the last few weeks and with renewed enthusiasm in the French presidency, building on the work of previous presidencies. So we're really now quite optimistic that by the end of the year we'll be able to adopt this text and have it in place. And so what's it about? I mean, it's about trying to introduce the principles of circular management to the value chain and life cycle of batteries. So introducing new sustainability requirements in the way that batteries are produced, targets for the recycling of materials that go into batteries. And what for me I think is perhaps the most exciting dimension is using new digital technologies through product passports in order to ensure that throughout the life cycle of batteries, everyone knows what all the component parts are doing, and that makes it much easier to then work towards reuse before we do recycling, reuse, and really manage the flows in the value chains in that way. And as I say, this pioneering approach is something then which we are bringing to the whole of our agenda under the Circular Economy Action Plan, and which with our new proposals which are coming up in a few weeks' time on Sustainable Products Initiative, we want to bring to other sectors too, and we maybe have time to talk about that. And just a final word, I mean, what we see is that, particularly in the battery sector, where the value chain is inevitably global, we rely in Europe on a huge amount of raw materials and inputs from other parts of the world. So European value chains are global value chains. And so if we're trying to introduce new standards of sustainable management and responsible recycling and reuse in the way that we manage batteries in Europe, we're also introducing that into global value chains. And that's why I think that the international collaboration dimension and working with like-minded partners like Norway is so vitally important. And just a final word, I mean, our Commissioner, Mr. Sinkevicius, will be with your Minister who is chairing the UNEA, the United Nations Environment Assembly conferences in a few days' time, working together, for example, on a global agreement on plastics and the circular management of plastics, again with this same philosophy that unless we work together internationally, we will not achieve what we want to achieve. So I haven't read out all my little cards, but I think I've covered the main points.
I think you've done extremely well. And it does sound like an adventure, the way you actually put it out there. Thank you very much. Now, this issue, you said, you know, introducing the principles of circular management, I will come back to that. It's very interesting to me as a moderator to see how these two words, circular economy, for me, have moved in recent years out of the Brussels bubble and much more widely, I think, into consumer awareness, but that's a whole other conversation. I'm going to turn directly to you, actually, if I may, Morten, because I'd like to pose that same opening question and get your point of view on how you think this coming battery regulation is going to affect the European battery market. So give us your 2 pence on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister and Excellencies. I'll take the industry perspective.
Yep.
Thanks for the same question. The battery regulations are important. They were important immediately when they were proposed. So they're important and they're working much before they are in effect, actually. Because we who are trying to enter into this space and develop battery industry in Europe, we are facing stiff competition from imports, from established players in China and Asia. And the way we as an industry, we wish actually as strong regulations as possible, because that makes our more sustainable value chains and sustainable technologies an advantage, which actually levels the playing field compared to our starting point. And it is another small point is that when the EU is going out so clearly with a strong strategy, regulations, incentives, it means that the EU means business. Everybody understands that this will happen. And it was not like that 10 years ago that everybody understood that the electrification would happen, but now everybody sees it will happen. And then we move people over in this industry, and we move money. So it's important. That, I think, is the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to say, just a smidgen and for a concise answer, I mean, I quoted there again Støre when he said, you know, we need more cooperation than competition, but of course it is a global world of competition, and that in itself can foster I mean, it's very much tied together. So when you cite there and you say, look, China, I mean, how do you see that? Are there things we can learn? Are there things they can learn? I mean, and I mean, for a couple of sentences, how do you see that sort of cooperation?
I think we must be quite impressed with what the Chinese are doing in the way they are building the car industry and the way they have built the battery industry. So we have great respect for that. So this time it is we who are coming a bit from behind, and we have to do it more smart.
Thank you very much. I'm going to now turn, as I said, I sort of would like everybody to be able to lay out their stall, and then we can just have a bit of a chat. Stian, I'd like to just focus in a bit more on this whole raw materials side of things, and obviously hear Elkem's point of view. Now, it has been said, and that Europe does not have enough raw materials to be big on batteries. Is that something with which you agree?
Yes, I think that's certainly true. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting Elkem and Vinode to participate here. I think with reference to the presentation, excellent presentation from Tore Sekkenes, there is certainly a critical shortfall on raw materials for batteries produced locally. I mean, the small bars compared to the big bars further out in the value chain. So it's about lack of nickel, cobalt on the cathode side. And then on the other side of the battery, on the anode side, you have predominantly graphite and also potentially in the future more silicon, which is also on the critical raw material list in the EU. So basically also silicon is also a raw material for advanced silicone solutions that are used in thermal management of battery packs and so on. Elkem has supplied this to more than 1 million car batteries now. So it's the kind of link here. Elkem is very much in the middle of this with silicones production, and we're also establishing now, focusing the strategic growth opportunities in anode materials in Vinode, focusing on production of graphite anode materials. So we're now planning to establish large-scale production in Norway, kind of enough graphite to supply car batteries, around 1 1 million cars. In every car there is about 60 to 80 kilograms of graphite. So this is really a critical input material. And I think it's important not only to focus here on the raw materials, because if you go kind of to the right of the second bar chart here, in the production of the active materials, the advanced materials that actually go into the battery cells, there is also a big lack of capacity in this part of the value chain. It's been a lot of talks on the cathode side, nickel, cobalt, and so on. But actually, there is a huge critical need on the other side, on the anode side, which is predominantly graphite today. And this value chain is completely kind of controlled, and Europe is completely dependent on imports from Asia and predominantly from China. These are materials that are very energy intensive to produce, and this production comes with often with a huge environmental footprint and also a huge CO2 footprint. So in this context, we see that Norway and companies like Elkem, Vinode, and so on can be a very important partner in a European setting for EU in the production of both raw materials, but also battery materials, stable, secure supply, but also materials produced in a much more sustainable way, based on green hydropower for these very energy-intensive processes, and also kind of combining this with the rich industrial traditions and high competency level we have in Norway to develop the technology further, automate, and make this production in a much more efficient way than it is today.
Okay, I need to, Is that okay? Just, no worries, you can come back momentarily.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, I know, because it's just horrible, isn't it? There is so much to say, and yet here, we're doing this in a really punchy way, but I do think our audience will thank us because they get all of those fantastically accessible interventions. So let us hear from you about, this important project of common European interest. If I might just come in and ask, I think the way you've explained it is that the Commission really is experimenting with relatively novel governing tools when building the European battery industry, not least the IPCEIs, which mobilise, very large P&P investments. So if you had to just say two key things that we've learned about these funding mechanisms, what would you say they are?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So many keywords already mentioned, worth to discuss. First of all, I would like to send my best wishes from our ministry, from our Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action. We, as our company, are responsible for coordinating the IPCEI on batteries and EU Bat-In. Our learnings, our journey starts 2019 with the first IPCEI discussions. If you ask me for learnings, there's one keyword in the IPCEI regulation, that's spillover. And spillover is one of the key elements, what is necessary to take part in an IPCEI, to be open, and that means to be open for change, knowledge and experiences, and really the aim to work together. And this is one of the very, very, I think, fundamental positive points of this industrial policy activity of the IPCEIs. We have now 12 member states in the IPCEI. We have more than 60 companies involved as direct partners, and we have several hundreds of indirect partners who are now working together, now starting when we have the projects on the start. The last ones are now on the track since a couple of months. And now we start the real ecosystem activities, and now we start the exchange of experience and knowledge, and this is the main issue of the IPCEI in the fortune. The other point, the learning point, what we have mentioned in the last month is the employment topic. To find the right people for the right jobs. This is competition as well, of course, and this is not competition between China and Europe. This is competition in between Europe, and this is a real crucial point for the success of the battery ecosystem, in our opinion.
Thank you very much. So to give you some guidance in the interest of how I can manage best the time, I'd like to invite you, if I might, Patrick, first, in just a cool minute, was there anything there, because you were scribbling, anything you sort of heard that you might want to come back on? And then I would like you just to take us into this whole dive a little bit deeper into the circularity issue, because it would be good to just understand, you can pinpoint the extent to which circularity can contribute to Europe being self-sufficient when it comes to raw materials. And we heard sort of more widely raw materials, also the active materials, and you said that there is a real kind of lack there, and you really pinpointed that. So over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, first I'd like to, just rebound on the really powerful contribution that the IPCEI has been able to make. I mean, this is a way of creating an agreed framework to allow public funding to flow much more easily from different sources to projects without having to get sort of held back by some of the state aid rules that happen in the European Union. And it's been a big part of what we've been trying to do, not only in the area of batteries, but also now in many other sectors as well. And I think it is really an exciting model to follow. And I think that, what I'd add to that is that, and what I didn't mention in my introductory remarks is, it's all very well for the European Union to create a sound and sort of predictable legal framework, and that's what we're trying to do with the regulation. But we also need to be creative and forthcoming in the way that we mobilize our financial support, whether that's the sort of upstream support through Horizon Europe, the Research and Innovation Programme, and the new Batteries Partnership, which has been pulled together in that context. I used to work previously in DG Research and Innovation, and I was present when we signed with Northvolt their first sort of loan from the European Investment Bank, supported by a program we called EDP at the time. And that has, very, very quickly scaled up to this massive gigafactory now, which is showing, the way that we can actually sort of, rise to the challenge of global competition, recognizing that we are rising from a pretty low base, right? But it is, I think, very encouraging. On the question you raise about circularity and, what are we doing in our regulation? What we're having to look at is all the different sort of stages in the value chain, with the idea that the best thing you can do to ensure circularity is to keep things functioning for as long as possible. So we need to look at the quality of construction, standards for durability, repairability, so that, there's some terrifying figures about how long typically we use our mobile phones. I can't remember the figures now because this is a battery story, not a mobile phone story. But, most of the embodied carbon in a mobile phone is already wasted when you open the packaging. And then you only keep your mobile phone for, on average, 18 months. And we don't have the systems for the batteries and other components in mobile phones yet properly to recycle them. So then, second thing we do is that we introduce labeling requirements, including through these sophisticated digital passports that I was talking about. And then we set clear targets, legally binding targets, which over time increase for the recycling and reuse of the core materials in batteries. And this comes together, we hope in a dynamic which will ensure that we will have in a few years a much more circular management of our building stock, which will mean that we are much less dependent on imports of these rare raw materials from other countries, and will also be contributing to our broader goals under the European Green Deal.
Thank you very much. And may I say to you, I actually keep phones for about 6 or 7 years. And I almost still have my phone from when I went on a trip to Russia in early 90s. I had a brick. I almost still have. I kept that for years.
You should get rid of that now. I would.
Do you think so? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, absolutely, yes. Do you know who I am, ladies and gentlemen? So, over to you. I've got the same. I just want to invite you both in the minutes, just the remaining minutes we have, to just comment on this issue of circularity and really how do we make sure, I can say to you specifically, how do we make sure that the European battery initiatives do really lead to a future circular battery market?
First, the very simple business approach again is it makes sense to reuse valuable materials. That is the fundamental, and so business and our environmental interests are very well aligned. But the thing is that it doesn't go automatically. So even if it makes sense, it requires a lot of coordination and incentivation and regulations by government for this to happen. Because the market is not really good at finding the right solutions when there are so many simpler solutions than recycling. But if I may maybe tell a short story about an example about policy that works. Some years ago, you know the Norway story about how everybody now has bought their electrical cars, and then we started crashing a little bit, and we realized some years ago that there is a need now, maybe not a huge market, but there is a need for someone to recycle the electrical car batteries. So Hydro, my company, and Northvolt, the Swedish startup, we went together, formed a 50-50 joint venture. We have now built the first and largest and most advanced European recycling plant, now in Fredrikstad, Norway. It's going to start production in a few weeks. And that has a capacity to churn through 8,000 tons of used batteries per year. That's 23,000 cars approximately. So that's and why did it happen? Why in Norway? Well, it happened because of the Norwegian government's very forward-leaning electrification policy. So that was the reason why it came so early. And also, when we do this with Northvolt, we do it, of course, not only for Norway. We do it because we want to go to Europe and build the next plant there. So we also know that the European regulation is creating a market for this, and the OEMs are it's super important for them that someone will take care of their batteries, that they have responsibility for. So policy works.
Thank you very much. If anybody is tweeting, there you go. You can put that one out there. Policy works. That's a nice short one. That fits into the designated amount of characters, I think. Let me come to you. And again, yes, circularity. Perhaps something, I mean, obviously, perhaps not touch upon those things you hear with which you agree, but anything you can add in terms of how it can contribute to Europe really being self-sufficient when it comes to raw materials.
Of course, recycling will be essential to make European battery production viable. It's about sustainability and utilizing really scarce raw materials into the batteries. It's about securing the access to the input materials. And it's, of course, also have an important economical aspect. So, but the recycling is, of course, only part of the solution here, because there is an enormous amount of virgin materials that's being needed. I think we have a demand of 800, 900 gigawatt hours by 2030. On anode material, that means like 800,000 tons annually. But these materials are very energy intensive. It makes everything to recycle them. A lot of attention here is on the expensive materials like nickel, cobalt, copper, and so on. But we should have the ambitions higher here to really recycle almost all part of the battery. Looking at the anode materials, we see that this is technically feasible. So it's about kind of, like Morten also alludes to, kind of pushing this recycling and making recycling a necessity for the batteries. I think, again, with Norway has a large amount of end-of-life batteries coming in early, can really contribute here to find technical solutions and gain the necessary speed and scale in this recycling game.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give the last word, actually, on this panel to you. I just want you to touch in the, I would say you've got 2 minutes, couple of minutes max? 2-3 minutes. I just want to touch on a couple of issues before I'm going to invite our penultimate speaker to do a little summary, just so I can give you a steer that we will be finished by 6 p.m. CET, and then you can all go and have your aquavit or wine or beer or a nice cup of tea. So one is, we know that the development in the battery ecosystem, and particularly in Europe, but in general, is super rapid. Projected demand, it's going to just increase exponentially in the coming years. So if there are particular trains leaving the station that companies and governments need to be on board, what give us a bit of an insight. And then I just wanted to ask, again, pick up on product passport initiatives, because if we are to enable successful circularity, then confidence, credibility and confidence in the data is absolutely critical in data exchange. So just touch on those 2 points for us. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me start with the last point. And in our first discussion before this conference, we talked about consumer acceptance for batteries.
Consumer acceptance, we did.
And raw material governance, in my opinion, is a very, very crucial point for this, not only for the deep material side, but as well for the more social and environmental topics. And for that, the product passport initiatives are very, very important. And we are a member of the Global Battery Alliance, which are working now for more than 2 years on the structure of a, as I said, global passport for batteries. It's a hard work because it's many different stakeholders are involved in this discussion, of course, and with their own ideas and aims. But I think it's worth, and it's worth as well for the acceptance towards the consumer. The other thing is to leave no one behind. I guess as well, this IPCI construction is very, very able to invite all different actors from not only from the industry, but as well as what I mentioned before on the other panel here, universities, SMEs, startups, even startups. These IPCI structure is very open to involve all these different interest groups in the building of the ecosystem. And that's what I call a very exciting journey to guide all these activities and to not coming from the industry, but more coming from the political side to combine different ideas and innovation. Innovation is the key for all these kind of transformation.
Thank you very much. So I want you to complete a sentence before I close this panel, and I'm going to start with you so that you don't get left until last, and I will finish with the Commission. And this is the following. In order to accelerate the advancement of green and resilient value chains, for batteries in this critical decade to 2030, we need to do what? One sentence.
We need to attract young people to be part of the whole game.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
We need to make sure that the necessary infrastructure is in place in time and where it's needed.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Morten.
In addition to obviously increasing diversity, I think we need to scale fast.
Scale fast. And to you, Patrick.
Yeah, and I think we need to continue to innovate in the way that the private sector, the public sector and the other stakeholders work together behind a shared agenda.
Thank you very much. I think they have done pretty well in letting us feel that this is an adventure, not a baby, but an adventure. So, and we did actually have a fifth speaker, female speaker, who unfortunately got COVID, so she could not be with us, so it wouldn't have been an entire panel on that sense, but thank you so much. You did have the toughest call because you were the second panel right near the end, but I thank Patrick, Morten, Stian, Ua. Please give them a very warm round of applause. Thank you very much. You may take a seat in the audience, and I'm going to invite now back to the stage Amund Vik, State Secretary, Norwegian Ministry of Petroleum and Energy, just to make a couple of remarks, and then he's going to hand back to me to do the final thank yous. So please push me off the lectern, or, well, don't do that. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been given the privilege to say a few concluding remarks. I'll try to be very brief. Let me first thank all the participants in the seminar. Your expertise and knowledge has contributed to a very interesting debate. The question of developing green and resilient industrial value chains is indeed a relevant topic in Europe today, and hydrogen and batteries are two areas of particular interest. I believe today's seminar has demonstrated that both the EU and Norway share high ambitions in these fields, and that we have much to gain from an even closer cooperation. Increased production of batteries is needed to achieve a low-emission energy sector and transport sector in Europe. This production must be efficient, sustainable, and circular. During this seminar, we have also seen how hydrogen can play a key role in the decarbonization of Europe. Let me particularly thank our colleagues from the European Commission, who has contributed substantially to today's seminar. There has also been a number of high-level meetings today between the commissioners and representatives from the Norwegian government. And we highly value this cooperation and look forward to an even closer cooperation going forward. Norway has a well-functioning energy dialogue already with the Commission that's been going on for years. And you can trust that Norway will continue to be a stable and predictable supplier of energy to the European Union also in the years to come. And thanks to everyone who's watching and for everyone who came, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. And may I just say a warm thank you again to all of our fantastically eloquent speakers who kindly allowed themselves to be bossed around by me. You really did successfully condense the contents of your considerable brains into some accessible and bite-sized interventions. I do thank you. We were working with the maths there, were we not? Doing the mathematics was hard on this one. Thank you so much, of course, to the Norwegian Prime Minister, to the Norwegian Ambassador to the EU, to Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, and to the mission of Norway to the EU. The team there has worked so incredibly hard to put this event together. Can I do a special shout out to Eva Mare and Solveig Verhelewegen, who have been working like fiends behind the scenes, not least adapting to quite a few last-minute changes. Can I thank the technical team here at the Residence Palace in Brussels for keeping the lights on, things rolling along smoothly for our online viewers. And thank you so much to you lovely online viewers for tuning in. If you have something brilliant to add to the conversation, well, share it with the wider community on LinkedIn or Twitter at Norway EU. And on that last bossy note, can I say as your moderator, I really did learn a lot. It was a pleasure. I quote the Prime Minister from the outset, apart from saying that Norway and all of those industrial actors that we heard from are absolutely reliable. I like that word. It's such an important one, really, such an important one today. And we have obligations to meet in the coming years. Timmermans echoed that when he said, this generation has a duty, which is daunting. And we just have about a decade to get it right to do it. We heard about shared values and purpose. We heard about unity to meet the challenge. We heard about the importance of leaving nobody behind, the just transition that's absolutely at the heart of the European Green Deal. But let me just echo the word adventure. I did also note that Executive Vice President said exciting times as we have so many technological breakthroughs. So on that note, I wish you all very much luck and passion in your ongoing endeavours, and more immediately, a very good evening. Thank you very much from me, Katrina Sickle. Thank you.